Hi, I'm John Quinton Barber, and I'm the founder and chief executive of the fully integrated communications agency Social. This is the third in a series of webinars which the growth company is hosting to help businesses keep businesses informed on the latest advice and guidance in relation to the current COVID-19 pandemic. There's no doubt that the uncertainty around the situation is very worrying for businesses up and down the country. However, as an organisation, the growth company is doing all it can to support organisations, issue advice and guidance, and share the latest developments as and when they happen. Each webinar will follow a different theme and will feature experts from a wide range of organisations. I hope you'll find today's discussion useful. Thank you very much for joining us for this third in a series of webinars examining the biggest public health issue for a generation. At this present moment in time, there's no shortage of news and information on coronavirus. For the numbers infected, countries impacted, through to panic buying and travel restrictions, we've got round-the-clock coverage. But what is getting less attention in the media is the business impact of coronavirus and, crucially, the role businesses can play in the battle to delay the spread of the virus and reduce the impact this virus has on our country, our communities, and our economy. This series of webinars will be looking at the global pandemic from the perspective of businesses. The subject of today's webinar is how we can work and operate virtually in light of recent government advice that we should all be working from home where possible. On Friday, we're going to be looking at legal implications and contractual obligations, and on Monday, we'll be discussing what businesses in the hospitality, leisure and tourism sectors can do to protect staff and customers whilst managing day-to-day operations. You can look out for further seminars for hospitality, tourism and retail sectors. And finally, I'd like to say that there's a word unprecedented is being used in the media constantly right now, and it is unprecedented times. We should perhaps be looking at the word fragile, because that's exactly what it is. Around the table, I'll be doing introductions, and we are all human, professional business people, that we're all in this together. So I really hope that you'll get good value from today's session. Back to today, I'm truly grateful to be joined by three people who have generously given up their time to be with us today. To my left is Adam Hain, and he's a partner at Knights. He's an employment law specialist, which is an innovative law firm with an agile approach to client servicing. Opposite me, I've got Ian MacArthur, who's head of the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter, and he heads that up, and that's all about improving employment standards across Greater Manchester. And across, we've got Sarah Nottenvey, sorry. I'll say it again.
No, it's a difficult one to say.
I had this in the rehearsal, I tell you, I had this in rehearsal. And Sarah is a digital creative and technology lead for the Greater Manchester Business Growth Hub. Your participation today is really important, and you have wealth of experience around the table. Please do send questions in, and I'll be asking the panel here. There is a hashtag to follow, or there's a hashtag to tweet from, and please do be generously tweeting around this, because we want as many businesses across Greater Manchester to know that this exists. This is authentic, good business advice, which the growth company is putting on for you. The hashtag is C19GC, and there's a wealth of information already if you go to businessgrowthhub.com/coronavirus. That's all over. So, hi. Ian, before we dive into some of the advice, just tell me how you're feeling about this week.
Fragile is a really interesting word I think you've used, John, in opening up. I think, and you also said the biggest public health threat in a generation. I think it goes beyond that. I used to work in public health years and years ago. I've never seen anything like this. In the way it's spread, in the way it's kind of not just infected us in a physical way, but it's infected our culture. I think we're all feeling a little bit of shock and awe at the moment.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, it's fascinating, particularly for people who are here to work with business and support businesses. It's fascinating because I think we're seeing responses, policy responses, that we go, yeah, that's great, and then you go, but.
Yeah.
And then you see the unintended, sometimes, consequence of something that's been put in place. And I think that leads to more questions and answers. So how I'm feeling at the moment is absorbed.
Yeah.
The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is think about what's the latest release on coronavirus. What do we do next? How can we work better how can we work smarter to help businesses across GM?
And of course, these are many questions that our audience are going to be having, so we'll be moving on to some of these questions. Sarah, how about you, the Growth Company, and yourself?
I'm kind of rolling this up from a personal perspective. So I have families that are not in the parts of my family are not in the UK, so they're very anxious, because of the travel ban. So I feel like I can't go to them if, in times of need. They can't come to me. On an even more personal level, nursery won't take my child in currently because she has a toddler cough, that she's had for weeks and weeks. So I don't think this is related. It's just the typical nursery bug. So at home it's quite hectic, and then I think there's a lot of anxiety around me. So I think, me personally, I think probably at some point yesterday, I have very much made the decision that I'm going to try and be that vessel of calm and kind of a steady approach, because there is a lot of craziness. And I think just taking that step back and kind of thinking, okay, what can we do next, rather than getting absorbed too much, is
absolutely, Sarah.
Approach.
And I think, again, just with the audience, these are all feelings that we're all going through. So from today, we're all in it together, and we're going to give you some good advice. And finally, Adam, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Well, firstly, I hate working from home.
So you're on the right webinar then. Hey?
Lawyers working from a tiny laptop, etc., isn't preferable, and my team mirror that. So, I think although we have all the capabilities to work from home, it's sort of helping manage that and the circumstances around it. Personally, regarding sort of professional capacity and the situation, it's quite unknown from a legal perspective as to how we're going to react. But I think the responses have been hugely positive. I think the responses not only from employees but from companies has been really considerate on both sides and flexible. So that's hugely positive. But I do think there's an element of we're at the tip of the iceberg and we don't really know what else is to come, so it's uncertain. I also have an 18-month-old daughter, so I'm waiting for that challenge to arrive with her trying to press every key on the laptop. But
and before we went live, Adam had some glitter on his face from the 18-month-old daughter.
Thanks for highlighting that.
And he was a little bit worried about that, being a lawyer, he would be. But I just said, don't worry about that, because we can't see what you're wearing. So this is the working from home conundrum we're all in, which we'll come on to.
2020.
It's 2020. But what I want the next 40 minutes or so to be talking about is actually practical advice for people who have been thrown into chaos. We've been thrown into chaos. I recognise that businesses tuning into this will be of various degrees of industries. Some will be already practically working from home as a business and have the infrastructure in place. I'm going to take this webinar from the common denominator that this is actually relatively new to most people. So if you can kind of answer some questions around about that.
And just in respect of that, I don't want to come across as the boring lawyer. So my focus is going to be on sort of outcomes and practical guidance on it. But if you have any questions that you want to address, then ask, because I don't tend to deep dive into any legal points. But
so please send your questions in. You've got a lawyer for 40 minutes for free. That's really interesting. I think just to dive straight into one of the questions, we've had one from Joe Scott, and Joe is saying that we are struggling to generate a remote server for the design team. Joe runs a very, very successful creative agency. I know Joe, so hi. But one of the real things about information sharing at this time is she's struggling to generate a remote server for the design team. The VPN isn't working as we need to. Does anyone have another recommendation? So around the table, if you have any other recommendations.
Well, right now, but I think it's probably best if we definitely take this question and kind of, I'm here to represent a huge team of business advisors that have all their specialities, and that sounds right up the street with one of mine. So very happy to kind of take that offline and give that advice. She's not the only one. We've had a lot of kind of questions around this. I think some of it is temporary because most of the services are actually not set up for the sudden demand. Even very, very big brands. We've seen Skype yesterday really struggling. So I think it's this week. I'm very much approaching it. It's this week, and then if next week is still in the sense of turmoil, then yes, we need to look further. But I think let's get through this week first.
Get through it.
Yeah.
But then I think, from my perspective here, it's if it's not possible to work from home, then the company still has to operate and has to find mechanisms by which to implement processes that are still providing a safe working environment for employees, and putting in various measures. So recently I was speaking to a manufacturing company who, for obvious reasons, can't send the factory home or the machinery home, and so they're putting in an A and B shift rota, whereby they're reducing the number of staff within the factory, which is social distancing, and can implement that, putting in obviously the cleaning recommendations and the mechanism in place at Public Health England. What they're also doing is that if one team was to fall down with the illness, they have a secondary team that can still run the factory. So I think that's a risk management perspective, and it's really, really practical a way of thinking about it.
Without wanting to, I think, Joe, I would say on this, and to everyone listening, obviously the businessgrowthhub.com/coronavirus will be the place to go always, because things are changing daily, as we know. So I think that would be certainly a place to look into. But without putting Greater Manchester on the spot here, but is there something that can be done for the providers? Is there dialogue going on with the providers? Is there anything that this is week one, isn't it? I'm not suggesting it might be happening now, but is that something that could be happening and should be happening?
I don't know what's happening right now. I know that I've been privy to a couple of conversations, previous to coronavirus crisis, and yes, there's been huge efforts in terms of infrastructure and making sure that not just we're here in centre, but also the other kind of local authorities have that in place. Whether that's being fast tracked, I would hope so.
No, I think it is.
Okay.
I think there's already conversations with the likes of Microsoft and some of the bigger providers to roll out as fast as possible the support for what we've got here. I think my comment on where we're shifting to is the pace. I might use unprecedented, John. Sorry.
No, please do.
It absolutely is. Lots of our employers that we've engaged with work flexibly and in an agile way. So they've been doing this stuff and planning for this kind of working operation for a long time. But in a matter of less than a week, people are supposed to respond to this and make it work. So we need to give ourselves a little bit of time.
Absolutely.
And take the pressure off ourselves a little bit to understand that this is going to take a little bit of time before culturally we get it right and technically we get it right.
I think that's a really good point, isn't it? There's going to be, the new norm we keep talking about is how temporary is the new norm, but there will be a rhythm to this, and I think, again, recognising that this is a shock and awe of week one, and 3 or 4 weeks ago we wouldn't be sat around here talking about this. We would have been doing our day jobs, and Joe, you'd have been
this time
working
last
happily.
week I was in the building across the road with 50 businesses talking about, we did talk about coronavirus, but we talked about other stuff.
Absolutely. So
this week we wouldn't even think about it.
I would absolutely urge people, I can't stress this enough, that the Growth Company is a huge help to us all here, and I think the Growth Company being the place for information and gathering that, we have to be patient, obviously. We have to just make sure that, there's a rhythm to this, but I know that there's things going and discussions happening. So please keep checking into businessgrowthhub.com coronavirus. And again, please do use the hashtag C19GC and get your questions in. We had a question earlier from Caroline at Seesaw in Manchester. And I feel for you, Caroline, here, because you said, you're due to launch co-working space for creative businesses this spring. Whilst people are at the height of remote working, it means now I'm thinking, what else can we offer our space for? Online community activities, and in addition to focus on well-being and networking via online webinars, etc. Do you have any other ideas what else SME businesses working from home could really benefit from? I think what we're trying to get at there is what resources and tools and things are available right now that you know of, and what do you think we should be creating?
I think I'll take the start with this. I think it's definitely a very difficult one. We're very close to a lot of the co-working spaces in Greater Manchester. They're all suffering in terms of how people are behaving. I think if you're about to launch, I would urge to think around, the actual launch date. Is there maybe some flexibility in this? This is just from me personally. If there isn't, a couple of ways to go down is, I think, and we'll be talking about this in a little bit more detail, but I think we need to facilitate cultural exchanges and kind of helping build communities, and allowing for space in the day for that. So I think in terms of your co-working space, if you already have people that were due to start with you, I would start encouraging them to have Google Hangouts, have group calls that partially are structured and then partially kind of like free form. So we're very much doing that as an organization kind of going forward. We're just setting the infrastructure up for that. I think because you were talking about a bigger operation, I would speak to a Microsoft Office rep, because they could give you, we know of deals where 6 months are for free.
Fantastic.
In terms of a trial. So, again, get in touch with us. We're more than happy to kind of guide through this going forward. But I think it's about being really creative with the tools that we're having, gamifying parts of it. I know you've just mentioned that you might be giving out Fitbits to your clients.
Or staff.
Staff, not clients. It was wishful thinking. No, but and kind of making the daily activity, because people are encouraged to go out while still adhering to kind of the social distancing, guidelines. But I think these sort of things will become really important. Who does the most steps a day, or just little things like this to just keep morale and.
I think it is a really interesting point that Seesaw have raised here, because it's almost ironic, isn't it, that a co-working space where people who set up their own business working for themselves have chosen to work together in a co-working space because we're social beings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is where we're hitting, or we will hit issues further down the line, because part of coming to work isn't just the vocation of what you're doing, it's the social interaction.
But also on that point of a lot of the tech firms that are trying to expand, and a lot of it's challenge. Mm-hmm. So being part of a group is perfect for the development and sharing knowledge.
Absolutely.
So even if it's, as you were saying, even if it's personal interaction, you could do it online or socially. I think is another way of looking at it.
So I think setting up some sort of Google Hangout or some platform for the co-workers to at least have that interaction. And I think that's something that needs to be taken into the normal workplace too. I think there's a real difficulty of when you're isolated and you're working from home and you feel the pressure to work almost harder. Mm-hmm. Because you feel, well, no one is watching me, so I better make sure I do that. But actually in the workplace, we spend a good lot of time chatting with our colleagues at the coffee point, over lunch. So we need to recognise that that's important as part of the mental well-being for the mental well-being of employees, and create that in a virtual space now. We need to really positively
absolutely.
do that.
I think just anecdotally from Social's point of view, we use Facebook for Workplace. We have done for a while, and if you're not familiar with it, it's worth probably checking in on that. And I think a lot of this is going to be about leadership. It has to be. I can only talk from a business owner, but every morning I give my staff a big hug virtually, so a big heart out when it's morning, a lot of professional love, because people are sitting there worried about the climate and the economy. And my role and our role as leaders is to first be honest, but then talk about what we can do and implement that. The well-being of our colleagues is absolutely critical at this time. And
can I just say, John, that's fantastic, that hug in the morning. Can you also do a hug at night?
Oh, we do. I do a video.
It's really important, I think, to punctuate the day. So that, we were saying to Adam earlier that when you leave the office at night, you say goodbye to your team, you say, have a good night, and we'll see you in the morning, sort of thing. How you got on today, perhaps. Without that interaction, there isn't the full stop. And there's a real danger from moving from the laptop into domestic setting without really having that division. And the discipline of having divisions through the day for breaks, etc. Really, really important.
Yeah, that's so important. I was explaining that the last 2 days I haven't taken a lunch break because I get so engrossed in what I'm doing, dealing with emails. Obviously, that it's a sort of an element of crisis management at the moment that people are going through, and it's so easy to get caught up on it. So I spent this morning trying to encourage my team to be aware of that and manage that. But I think these ideas of hugs and making sure you communicate at the end of the day that everybody's getting through this and doing really, really well, and that's really everybody's agreed in that way. But I think it then ties into communication, and I think because of that communication, because of that trying to address issues, and I think that will help in the long run as well, which then ties into sort of, just to take it back to a sort of legal position, trying to make it practical. There's a lot of flexibility in employment law provided you can obtain agreement. You can change people's contracts of employment with agreement. You can change working scenarios with agreement. And so it's fundamental that you keep employees on side, because if you can do that, it will give you so much more natural flexibility in the ways of working. And that's going to be one of the most important things of getting us through this time.
This is a really important point. We've got another question, and thank you, Meryl Levington, for sending this in. This is really, this is very, very, very important. How can businesses work together where one is having to stop but has staff with skills who can help others where increased capacity is needed? I think that's a really key question that will be the forefront of a lot of business owners' minds. So how can we do that? I mean, I might want to answer, if I can provide it, my answer as a business owner here, obviously, touch wood, etc. So far so good, but what we're finding, we have 40 employees across the country in different business units, Leeds, Bristol and Manchester. Right now, I don't see them as Leeds, Bristol and Manchester. They are one team, and we've got skills in them teams that we just have to be agile enough to cover what we need to cover. And so that's how we're doing it. And there's a daily meeting with my senior team. I have a check-in every morning, and we look at capacity and make sure we're deploying it where it's needed. Now, it's very different to what is the question from Meryl, but I think it's very related, is actually if businesses where there's no one, having to stop work, there's an opportunity here, I think, and this is where the new world emerging should come in. And I would be looking as an employer, around the table here, and you're smiling because I know it's always on your agenda. How do we bring this together? How do we harness this together?
I think, starting from a smaller level, what we're advising businesses to do is to have, almost like a quick review of all of the primary but secondary skills that might be, within the team, so that if someone drops out, we might have others that, could jump in. And this is almost on a voluntary, kind of going back to your point, it's an ask to the staff. It might even be a chance for someone to get stuck in something that, they always wanted to, help out with. So I think it's that internal look first. But I think probably just to add to that, one of the good tools is Puka Teams.
Puka Teams. Yeah.
So in terms of just having that notion of I'm open if you want to ask me a question, so it's kind of having that visibility of the team. So rather than having to formally write an email or something, it's just it's someone that says my status is open, and if you have a question from one office to the other, please just do so. But I think on a wider scheme, it's certainly something we're looking at, because we know that some businesses can't continue business as usual for a couple of weeks now, and there is a lot of questions flying around. I think one of the very obvious ones is the ask for ventilators, and businesses that could produce those. So they might traditionally not be making those, but they might be making parts or anything like this. So we're currently reviewing our client base, getting in touch with manufacturers or other organizations that we think could help in producing these going forward. So, if there's anything in particular that...
Absolutely, Meryl, if there's anything in particular that we haven't answered there, then please do come back. I think
there is an opportunity for brokerage here.
And sharing the knowledge and capacity.
Undoubtedly, there are going to be casualties from the workplace in this. In many respects, all bets are off. You do what's needed in this kind of time of crisis, but there's also opportunity there perhaps to take a deep breath and think, well, maybe I can reskill. Lots of online courses here now. So there's an opportunity perhaps to think, well, maybe particularly in the digital sector, there's an opportunity to upskill and then redeploy the skills. Thinking about the crisis itself and where we're heading to, look, there's another webinar on Monday about the hospitality sector. I understand. So we understand what they're going through now, particularly the lower end, lower paid staff, the service staff, etc. Those that are on 0 hours contracts, etc. So they'll be looking for alternative work. Now, one of the things that I think will be needed very quickly here is if and when schools get closed, we need more childcare. And we need people that are qualified or at least DBS checked and ready to step in to help support the economy, actually, because without childcare, the economy will struggle even further. So it's about reskilling and looking for the opportunities, I think.
Absolutely. I've got a question which is going to be relevant for you in a second, Adam, direct. I'm just going to re-promote the hashtag. So please use hashtag C19GC on Twitter. Do keep questions coming in. It's really good that that they're coming in. But I have a question here from Steve Crompton. Hi, Steve. We are a micro SME manufacturing business whose business is primarily export. There are only 3 of us, and these are fragile and worrying times. Any advice? We cannot work from home.
Okay. So it depends really on whether there isn't any issues with working from the office. If it's not possible to work from home, then you're entitled to work from the office. There is no restrictions on you from going in. It's saying only critical travel or where needed. So I think your situation is such that you have to work from the office. But then its implementation here, as I said before, to repeat myself, is making sure that there is a safe working environment for your staff, making sure you're not taking in any necessary risks. So ideally trying to limit use of public transport or stop use of public transport if possible. But if you're going to have to use public transport, use it at non-peak times. Implementation in the workplace is going to be, as I said before, so cleaning, making sure that you're using hand sanitizing, making sure you're distanced, putting in place those measures, making sure you're having a sort of a catch-up every morning to ensure that nobody's showing signs of the symptoms, they've not been in contact with anybody with signs of the symptoms. It's the element of implementation is relatively practical. Then, depending on the way you manufacture and your circumstances, is can you split shifts and time, so reducing the amount of contact. Because obviously if there's only 3 individuals within the business, if one of you falls down and you all get infected, the company grinds to a complete halt. So I think from a risk perspective is how do you manage that?
No, sorry, didn't mean to jump in. I think in terms of shift work, that's definitely one of the big pieces of advice that we're giving, just to kind of minimise overlap where people are working together in one locality. I think the other thing they've mentioned that they're mainly exporting. That even though at the moment, nothing has changed as such, however, obviously big changes are on the horizon. So I would urge, and again, we have a great team of advisors that this business can access. But I would very much look at your target audience and potentially reprofile if certain distribution doesn't work anymore, or simply the market might not be open for it, or anything. So I would start looking on a more national level, because that's that will be the easiest to facilitate, and then kind of again novel and different ways of how to service who you're currently servicing.
I'd just echo what you said about going to the Growth Hub to get advice, but also in light of the Chancellor's announcements yesterday, keep an eye on what happens in terms of practical implementation of those measures, because Steve and his business sounds an ideal candidate to access some of that financial support in the short term.
And the same if somebody falls ill as a consequence of it, there's opportunity to obtain 2 weeks sick pay funded by the government as well. So there is that help there, I know, to some level, and it's ever changing. We were saying before we came on that this is evolving. I think there's going to be there's rumours of pending changes to the layoff provisions. So just by way of background, is you're entitled to lay people off if you have a contractual right in the contract or they agree, which again ties back to this communication. But if you don't have the contractual right to do so, there's rumour, it's only rumour at present, that they will bring in legislation that will enable you to lay people off for maybe a 4-week period or for 6 weeks in any 13-week period. So, and that means it gives you some breathing space. And that could be an option if, for example, the work dries up. It's giving you that flexibility, because hopefully at the end of the day we're trying to avoid redundancies, we're trying to avoid restructuring. We're all in it together type mentality. So I think there's lots of different options here, and the starting point is always your contract, but I think that the second point is then interaction with the workforce, reducing hours, and working from home on shifts and reduce patterns.
Just quite related, and Nancy Monaghan, thank you via Twitter for your question, which is related. Do we know whether small teams will be allowed to meet to create online content? This is what we want to do, but we're not sure if it's a sustainable an idea if restrictions become tighter. So again, it's a related question about current and what could come.
So at the moment, just going back to your point, there is no restriction. Essentially, it's guidelines. It's kind of best practice advice. We see in with the business community, we see a lot of that happening at the moment. People are still trying to kind of make best use of the time now. Obviously, taking all of the precautions they can, and then probably going forward, it would be things like having Google Hangouts that are then filmed and things like that. So I think at the moment, yes, with all of the caveats of meeting in small groups, but at the same time, look at the different technology that's there that helps with that. Just
be slightly aware of GDPR and confidentiality. So I think there's nothing wrong with it, as we've said, as long as you take the usual precautions, but just be mindful of where you're meeting, mindful of data being easily accessible, and making sure that it's an appropriate environment to meet and to have these discussions.
I've got a great, sorry, no.
I was just going to pick up on that point, because there is another ancillary point about, and it's a health and well-being one really, if you are working from home, or you're asking your employees to work from home, if possible, give them a separate PC and phone. Not only does that get over the GDPR and data issues, but it also gives them the opportunity to switch the thing off. Because without that ability, and you're still on your social network, perhaps your personal social network, and you're working on the same machine, then you haven't got the opportunity to switch off. And if you're going to do this for a long time, you need to.
It's getting people in good habits early, isn't it?
It is. Rubina Begum, this next question is quite pertinent, because I think we're covering majority here about what if and when you can work from home. But Rubina says what do we do as a multi-trade company? And remember, we're in the first week, so we're all trying to process this. There's no kind of like golden answers here, but any kind of advice, what we think's coming over the hill.
I think you follow the social distancing recommendations as far as you possibly can. I don't think we can say much more than
but I suppose you're in an outside. I'm assuming. Sorry, I'm making various assumptions here. Apologies, but I would assume the vast majority, there's a huge forecourt that's available. There is a situation whereby it's going to be less. I'm not an expert on the transmission of it, but my understanding, if you're out in the environment, in the open air, it's more positive. So, and obviously there's going to be reduced numbers coming to the site, but I would imagine people are still going to go, because people are still going to go in reduced numbers.
Life goes on.
Life does go on, and I think that's a key question, isn't it? About we're in first week. So we're not using that horrible word, or the right word, unprecedented. This is first week, and the rhythm of the new norm will come. And what does that look like? And I think Rubina's absolute concern is nobody's going to come. When do we start trading? When does this? And I absolutely, the government has done the right thing this week with the health. That's absolutely critical. But then there's got to be key messages then about business, and actually, we've had the announcement yesterday from the Chancellor, but actually come on guys, you can trade, you still need to build houses, you still need to build roads, you still need to buy goods, and we have to adopt to that. And I would be looking, if I was sat at home in my work clothes, looking and asking, is there any, I'm looking for green shoots here right now, but this is week one. This we have to get into this mentality. There has to be that kind of leadership that says we're still trading.
Yeah.
Money is still exchanging hands. We're still trading. It's different. So I'm not putting on the spot saying, what do you think about that? Because clearly there's no answers right now. But I suggest that's what businesses should be looking at. Just to remind you again, a wealth of information which is increasingly being updated daily. Businessgrowthhub.com, coronavirus, and again on social media, on Twitter, the hashtag is C19GC. Keep tweeting. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I kind of want to open this up right now while we're still going through some of the issues, just to look about, we haven't got a crystal ball here, but actually, what ideas have we got right now that or we can share that we think will come in? Technologies are really interesting. What tech products can you recommend, Sarah, for people to dive into?
Before we kind of go into specific tools, I think one of my kind of ultimate top tips is that a lot of the tools for remote working are on 1 or 2 month free trial basis, and I would encourage there to be a mentality of, we'll give this a go, we'll trial this, and potentially in 2 months' time we might try something else, or if it's the right thing that we will adopt it. There's been from the Business Growth Hub there'll just, I think imminently there'll be a wonderful kind of crib sheet around how to facilitate remote working and all of the digital tools that we are endorsing, often free of cost or on a free trial basis, with really good tutorials on how to embed it, because this is another thing that we're very aware of, that there's barriers of usage around, I'm not a techie person, I don't want to use this, I don't want to use an app or anything like that. So we're very mindful of it, and we're quite we're looking for the best deals out there. I anticipate that very frequently we will be updating those, because companies are reacting to use different ones. I think around wellness and kind of well-being of staff, I think that's something that we should very much kind of keep in front of mind as well. There's a great app actually that I've come across yesterday called Chimp or Champ, which is basically, I don't know if
Chimp or Champ, I've not come across it now.
Which is an employee happiness meter, which is which it sounds really simple, but actually a great thing, because everyone can kind of either tell the world how they're feeling, and just kind of it's a quick check-in. It's informal. The whole team can kind of sign up to it. So things like this. There's obviously all of the just so that I don't forget any. We have a whole list. They'll all be very easy to access. From I think it. The tools fall into 3 different categories: online meetings, kind of desktop sharing, and then kind of video conferencing. There is big brands, that can be used, but there's also small ones, and we're going to try and collate them all for you. And
absolutely, there's going to be tech people right now creating the product for the future right now to make this happen for us. So I think that's good. Just related on that, I've got from Twitter, Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter.
I know, the devil.
Hi. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Ian. You don't know what's coming, do you?
Well, I do. I've seen it.
Our days at the office have a lot of natural breaks that don't happen at home. How can we create virtual coffee breaks to check in with colleagues and to have division in the day? Sure. Fantastic question.
I would expect nothing else. But let me just give some top tips, and we'll pick that up along the way. I think from the outset, we need to get our managers in the right place culturally and get their heads around the fact that they're not managing directly like they normally do. Trust is paramount in this, and how you build trust over time so that managers can relax a little bit and the employee can relax a little bit more too. That will need some structure. I think if you're working at home, you really do need to create some structure. If you commute normally, bin the commute and go for a walk. And when you come in, you start work. At the end of the day, go for another walk. and then
Yeah,
you've
right.
stopped work. One of the things I was told very early on about home working is get a dog, because that forces you to do that. So, you know, there's that sort of pattern, and I think you can build patterns into your day. Instead of meetings and phone calls on your diary, just say what you're going to work on in your diary, and then go, right, at 11 o'clock, I am out of here for 20 minutes because I'm going to make a coffee. And I'm going to do nothing for 20 minutes. There's some research that says we're only productive for 25 minutes at a time in any event. I know it's hard, but one of the top tips is maybe turn off your social media feeds, particularly when there's so much going on.
Absolutely.
But that'll keep you concentrated, and then you can use that 20 minutes to catch up. On your social media feeds. There's some things about space. Not everybody's got, you know, the benefit of a box room or an office, or so it might be on the kitchen table. You may have, in these circumstances particularly, other people at home. You might need to set out some rules.
Yeah.
Just about, I was on a call just the other day with about a dozen of us, I think, actually on Skype. And someone was cleaning the dishes right behind someone who was on the call, and it deafened everybody. It's those sorts of rules.
Yeah.
We just need to be careful about how we do that. And I think we touched on it already about communication. Don't think we can have too much. Expect over communication at the early stages particularly. But for a manager to, you know, make sure that they're very clear on what they expect and what they at the beginning and at the end of the days, those sorts of interactions. I think also for people who are working at home today, do relax a little bit, because personally I find some days working at home better than others.
Yeah.
Some days I'll be massively productive, and others I'll be totally distracted. And I think that's just natural. So don't worry about that if that happens. But find solace in your colleagues,
Yeah.
because they'll be feeling lonely, isolated too. Make time in your day to interact with them, not just on work, but in an informal way as well. And again, you can schedule that.
Great advice.
I think we've, as a team, we've approached, since yesterday, we're doing our catch-ups whilst we're outside walking. So quite a few of us have a dog. So we're doing that. So I think, you know, under the assumption that from time to time there'll be a command set because the dog needs to be put in line again. But as long as everyone knows this, I think this is what it will be about. You know, it's a quick, oh, I have my child with me, or I have the dog with me, or something, and I'm currently outside. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, just because you're taking a walk in the park doesn't mean that you're not working.
Absolutely.
But I think it's about looking at and how we can combine that.
I think just to feed in on that, I think that's important with the communications point hugely, is it's setting expectation. It's what you expect might not be what other people expect, but everybody understanding where they're at is critical, because if we misjudge that, it damages trust as well. And I think this, we haven't really touched upon it, but the other thing is trusting people. There is, I'm not an expert in this field at all, but there's a lot of literature online saying that actually working from home can be far more productive because you don't have those interruptions. So if you can potentially get this right, this could actually be hugely positive and could change the way and increase productivity within your business. So I think engage that. Look at this as a stress test.
I'm just no, absolutely. I'm just conscious that we're just about to wrap up. The final thing I say on that, you know, here's a time for empathy. As leaders, as managers, put ourselves in our employees' colleagues' shoes and what are they thinking, and we react to that. And I think that will help the rhythm. Sadly, we're coming to the end. I think this has been fascinating. Fascinating probably. It's been a very informative discussion, and I'd like to obviously thank you for being part of that. I hope that you've all found the discussion informative, and that as a business, you know, you do feel a little bit more prepared for the effects of what's coming with COVID-19. Get a pen right now, because this is going to be a really important email address, and really do use this and all the resources available by the fantastic Growth Company. If you've got any questions, some questions that haven't been answered, or you want answering, info@growthco.co.uk, info@growth.co.uk, and we'll get back to you. We're going to have more webinars coming shortly, and they'll be focusing on a range of topics, including legal implications and advice for harder industries, such as hospitality, leisure and tourism. But for now, I just want to remind us all what I said at the beginning. We're all in it together. We're all human professionals. This is fragile, and let's keep agile. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you.